Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Clarice. A great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I thought it was really interesting how they handled this. Obviously, I'm going to admit, I did my homework for the first time ever. I think I fully watched Silence of the Lambs for the first time. I think I might have seen bits and pieces of that, or maybe, I don't know. I definitely have never seen it all the way through. I might have seen bits and pieces. I might not have never seen anything of that movie. I have no idea. Watched it for the first time, which obviously helped going into this. Obviously, I think they filled in enough that you didn't need to, but regardless, it is interesting. Obviously, it's been a year for Clarice, and she's kind of become a little bit of a celebrity because she wasn't even technically a full official FBI agent when she took down Buffalo Bill. And now, obviously, she's all over the tabloids. And obviously, the families were speaking out, and that kind of researched a lot of stuff. So now she's gaining a lot of attention to the point they brought up something interesting where she has to deal with the fact is a lot of her colleagues are kind of looking down upon her because it's she's become the quote unquote face of the FBI, but she's no, that's not me. I was just doing my job. And, it's she's gained a form of fame and infamy to a certain extent, which, that's such an interesting thing because obviously she's juggling with her own complicated situation, being in the presence of a, serial killer like that, being in that tense situation. And her therapist was even saying some interesting stuff where it's the fact, well, for one, he brings up the fact is, hey, your last therapist, she was he wasn't my therapist. It's he literally ate you. It's that wasn't my therapist. It's you made a mistake. You were told not to present any information to him, and you did. You got personal. She's it was 3 days. We didn't have a lot of time. What I thought was fascinating, though, is later on, because Esquivel ends up asking her, why are you called Bride of Frankenstein? I'm wondering, are they kind of referencing, because, Frankenstein, the Bride of Frankenstein is about Frankenstein's monster getting a bride, not about actual Frankenstein, right? So they're trying to refer to, I don't know whether they're referring to Lecter as Frankenstein and she's the Bride of Frankenstein, or whether he's, or is it supposed to be more he's the literal Frankenstein, as in Victor Frankenstein, Lecter is that, making her the bride of him, and that Buffalo Bill was kind of their Frankenstein's monster. I don't know what, because that's a misconception I've had, and a lot of people have. When they think Frankenstein, they think the monster. The monster is Frankenstein's monster. Victor Frankenstein is the scientist who created it. So that's why I'm I don't know where they're going with that metaphor. I'm probably completely conflating it the wrong way. Whatever the case may be. I just thought that was just kind of interesting. But obviously she also really recognizes her therapist is trying to get her to open up. It's oh, he said oh, my patient left that magazine. She's no, bullshit. That's a pristine magazine. You left it open, so you brought it in here on purpose to get me talking, because she kind of dodges a lot of the questions about everything. Because we find out, interestingly enough, she's kept in touch with the victims of the rest of Bill's victims' families, kept in touch with them with the exception of Catherine. Because she even said this line where it's there were no survivors, and then it was almost because even I caught it, and the therapist said what about Catherine? You don't even see her as alive. That was even, I was yeah, Catherine survived to a certain extent, because she's trying to justify by being to be a survivor means you had to have been a victim, and she's I wasn't a victim. It's she's unwilling to, because I think for her it's acknowledging being a victim. I think in anyone would have a hard time. No one wants to see themselves as a victim. No one wants to feel vulnerable. And I think considering her experience, it's of course you don't want to be vulnerable about that you already kind of live with it enough in your head, people getting you to talk about it, people making it a much bigger thing and just making it worse. You've never really had time to really recover and everything, So I thought that was so, fascinating. And then also, obviously, she gets dragged into this new task force that's being put together by Ruth, because Ruth is I owe you for saving my daughter. And we also find out Catherine's actually been trying to get in contact with Clarice, but Clarice won't answer the phone just because I guess it drudges up the past. So that's the interesting thing. You can't communicate with Catherine, but you can communicate with the family, because I think it's a little different, because it's there's a little bit of a disconnect, because it's these are the family members of someone who went through that. You kind of went through it, not to the same extent, but I think it's a thing where Clarice probably tries to like push down her own trauma to the whole thing, the PTSD she suffered. It's like, my issues are nothing compared to the people who were killed by him. Because even clarifying, like, no, he didn't skin people, then kill them. He killed them and then skinned them. And he's like, her therapist is like, is that an important distinction for you? But Ruth Martin is, in a new position, and she's offering Clarice this job because it's like, oh, there's potentially another serial killer. And after going through what she went through, it's like, you saved my daughter. And it's like, she's jumping on the serial killer thing of like, I'm never going to let another Buffalo Bill run rampant, here again. So I got to put a lid on this really quickly, and obviously Clarice wants nothing to do with it. It's like, let me stay, because I think she talked about the fact that they nicknamed her Igor just because, like, I guess, because she stays down there in the behavioral science place and just kind of does her thing, keeps her head down low, because apparently, like, that magazine covers, like, the first appearance she's had in, like, a year, at least to the public and stuff. But Ruth is kind of not taking no for an answer. It's like, you're going to do this, like, because no one else can understand, like, no one else can understand things the way you do, because you were in a position, because I am someone who almost lost her daughter to this, but luckily you saved her daughter. She even brought up the interesting thing about Catherine, that Catherine is like, she's thin, very thin. She's like, I don't need a psychiatrist to know what's going on there. Buffalo Bill went after thicker women, so that kind of says a lot, that she's trying to stay slim, because it's like, maybe, just psychologically, it's like, if I stay thin, like, maybe someone won't ever come after me again. It's, a sort of psychological, like, defense mechanism, which everyone has their own to kind of face their demons. I should really talk about some of the casting in this too. Like, I didn't realize this until I was Googling something else, and I ended up finding this out. But obviously the actress who plays Clarice is, Rebecca Breeds. Interesting enough, an Australian actress. I figured she was, I knew she wasn't American just because the thing I know her from is the originals, because I had to Google her character's name for the originals because it's been a while, but she was Aurora. She was one of the main vampires that came back in season 3 of the originals to kind of confront the Michael Sense. It's a whole thing regardless. I just think it's actually interesting too, because Legacies is also on this night, and that's associated with, obviously it's in the Vampire Diaries universe, so it's interesting that would happen on the same night, because the show's kind of focused on, Klaus's daughter. So I'm reading too much into it, but I just thought it was interesting. But I think it's so interesting that she nailed, like, the accent, like, especially because obviously, like I said, I just watched Silence of the Lambs, so it's more so, they made it part of the character, but that's also because Jodie's so iconically connected to the character. I forgot that, like, Julianne Moore, because I haven't seen, the other movies popped up after I finished the Silence of the Lambs, but I haven't watched them. But I know, like, Julianne Moore kind of takes up the role afterwards, so I don't know if she does whether she kind of mimics, like, Jodie's accent or not. But it's like, to know not just an Australian actress to do that too, I think is so neat, just to be like, oh, that's because not only are you doing an American accent, you have to do a very specific American accent. I think that's such an interesting thing. Like, but I think she nails it. I think she nails a lot of, like, Clarice's mannerisms. Like, I've never read the books, so I don't know if this is very intricate to who she was in it. But obviously she says a lot of sirs to whoever she's responding to. And you also have to think about, maybe it has something to do with the times too, where it's like, as a woman, kind of got to be extra polite, once again, it's in the 90s, so maybe that plays some role in it, or maybe that's just so intricate to her character, like, so I'm sure that probably was in the books, or book, so it's probably, I was wondering if that was just, for the movie, but it might be in the book, regardless, tangents and all that. But we also had the Paul is played by the actor who played Abraham in The Walking Dead. We also saw Cal Penn. I was like, holy shit. But basically, Paul, the moment Clarice shows up at the crime scene, it's like, okay, you're basically going to shut up and do what I tell you to do. You're not gonna say anything unless I give you, basically, like, you're going to say what I want you to say. Because it's like, for him, it's like, the only reason why you're here is because Ruth is pulling all the strings to make this possible, to make this happen. So the fact of the matter is, we want this simple and clean, because it's like, this is her game, and we're all players in it, and it's like, we're just going to do that so we can go back to just focusing on our job. Because it's like, Ruth put you out here because she knew it'd get media attention, a whole bunch of cameras on this, which obviously they talk about it later on. Yes, Ruth has her own reasons for doing this because she wants to make this unit special so that, it's like, I think it's supposed to be like a deterrent against serial killers. She wants there to be this symbol of like, this is what she's backing, what she's behind. It's like, Bill was able to run rampant for so long. We're going to stop anyone from ever kind of going to that same level again. Like, that's what this group is here for. I guess that's kind of the messaging she's coming. Like, Ruth is in a position where you definitely get this essence about her where it's like, I get what I want and I make it happen, But when they're examining the bodies, obviously we get introduced to the rest of the team. Esquivel, Clark, Kyle Penn's character was Tapani. We didn't get to spend too much time with Clark and him, but obviously Esquivel is the one we spent a lot of time with. We learned obviously like he was in the military sharpshooter, but looking at and examining the bodies, Clarice it's meant to be like label it a serial killer, move on thing, but for her she couldn't because she was like, there's just the way the mouth bite marks are, as she said, they didn't kiss, plus the stab wounds. It's like she's like it's almost like too make it. She eventually talks about it. It makes it seem like it's too random, like you're going through, which is very similar, I think, very similar to the Buffalo Bill case. Like, the whole point was to make it seem random to kind of hide the fact is that his first victim, which was the third body discovered, was a more personal kill. So I think there's obviously you kind of see some similarities in this, but because for Clarice, she's like, I'm not really comfortable making this a serial killer just because it's like, yeah, a lot of this, but it's like, because she's like, it's too broad of a statement to really just 100%, because I guess these are still those early-ish days, because I'm not well-versed in all things crime. I'm not a criminologist, so I don't know all things crime, so I don't know when the term serial killer actually became, maybe in this time frame. It's still I think a relatively fresh enough term, probably not fresh, but enough that it's like, there's probably only like a handful of examples, maybe not. Once again, I'm not a criminologist, so I don't know the ins and outs and the history of it, but it presents this really interesting aspect of her kind of having to be like, no, like there's definitely something here, but no one wants to really listen to her. In particular, Paul, because Ruth is kind of suggesting, Paul has an issue with you because he was one of the people hunting down Buffalo Bill and you kind of got credit for taking him down, which, Paul is kind of like, you got lucky, So it's like, for her, it's like, you're not really listening to what I have to say. Like, she has to prove herself to so many people. Hell, even at the office at one point, some nearby cops were looking like, oh, wait for this. And then, like, there was lotion. It's what they put on. I thought that was going a different... I won't get it. Miggs is what I thought that was kind of referencing at first, but it's like, oh, the lotion, Buffalo Bills thing. Okay. Because that it just made me think of the whole Miggs thing first. I don't know. I was like, would they really go that ever? But, like, I mean, not like the Buffalo Bill thing's any better, but still, like, I think, so... So, Esquivel tried to make her feel better. It's like, oh, those are like the guys in fraud. Like, no one on our team would do that. Like, that was, which is also like shitty. Like, once again, it kind of proves the point I was also making too. Like, I think in that particular field, there's not a lot of women. Like, everyone on her team is a male. So I think that's also good. Like, not only do you have all this attention, you're kind of like infamous. Like, a lot of people, it's like, oh yeah, a lot of people in your graduating class hate you because you got so much attention. But also, like, it's going to make people kind of crack jokes about you. It's like, it's almost like make themselves feel better, make themselves feel bigger. They have to kind of demean her to a certain extent. It's like, who the fuck razzes someone like that? It's like, oh, this instance where you had to do, this thing that a serial killer did, put the lotion in the back, It's like, who the fuck does that? That's some really fucked up shit. Let's be frank, Because I'm like, I don't think anyone else gets any razzing like that, because that's not even razzing. That's just super messed up, especially considering she's still dealing with it all psychologically. Hell, even to the point she's talking to Catherine later on, and there's that thing where, like, Catherine is like, what was the first thing you ever said to me? It's like, you'll be safe. And it's like, I'll never be safe. It's like, the fact of the matter is, she's like, my mom, you're going to believe my mom's lies, but it's like, you're not safe. Like, you have no one. All you have is me, because we went through this experience together. And it's like, even to the point, like, she smashed her mirror, because I think I think that's another reason why she lost weight too, because it's just like, I don't want to have anything associated with that time, and I don't want to be that person anymore, So I think I think we're going to definitely see potentially if they decide to do more with Catherine, which I'd assume they would, because her mom's going to be a big part of this story, I assume. It seems like they're going to make a point of like, probably like, psychologically speaking, she can't like stand looking at her reflection, because it's like, I mean, especially when you think about like what Buffalo Bill was going to do to her. He was going to skin her and kill her, and I think that probably it's just it messes with you on a psychological level of just your own self-image and how you see yourself. So I'm assuming, but I thought that's such an interesting development of like what that dynamic is going to be. Like, we both went through this traumatic thing, and it's like all we have is each other. Outside of that, we have no one. You have no one. Don't ignore my, like, it's this, I don't know if I'd call it codependent, like, what you would, it presents itself in a very interesting element, like, psychological element, So I'm definitely interested to see, what they do else with that, because it's also like, how can you be out there in the world? Because I'm sure seeing Clarice on TV and stuff like that, I think for her, she almost resents her, because it's like, how are you trying to live a normal life? Like, no, we're both screwed up and there's no undoing it. It's like, do you wake up, from the nightmares? The mobs, do they wake you up? And it's like, yeah, like, it has impacted Clarice, and I think she feels like she's not in a position that she can really say, or she can't talk to anyone about it. And I think because she wants to try and forget it, like, but it's like hard to do that when it's just front page news and stuff like that. Her being a part of this case and everything. Which, circling back to the case, they look into it, and it immediately starts presenting itself as this like, okay, like Clarice immediately, obviously not feeling like it is this serial killer case, when it's like diving into and kind of learning a little bit more about the victims and their family, like that, each one had like kids who were had some issues. Like the first, the dude's like, oh yeah, I guess that shows that this is still relatively new, is that he's like, my son has autism. He's like, do you know what that is? So I thought that's still relatively new, but like each one kind of has their own what's the word? Because I don't want to be insensitive. I don't know what the, because the word I'm thinking of, I was going to say abnormality, but I feel like that's very like a very harsh word to use in that sense. They all have conditions, I guess, is the best way to kind of put that. Like I said, I wouldn't want to be demeaning or offensive in any light in that regard. But it's like, each one of them has a thing, and it eventually comes back like, oh, like one of the victims, the one who has a son who has autism, it turns out like she was taking some meds for some migraines because she was a part of like some clinical trial, and then it turns out all these victims were related to that clinical trial, and they had there was some effect, and it turns out there was a reporter, Rebecca. Interestingly enough, Rebecca being, I thought that was interesting. It's like, oh, a reporter's name Rebecca, and the actress. I mean, it's a common enough name, but it's just the actress who plays her, Clarice's name being Rebecca and everything. But it ended up being like, they're whistleblowers. So all these victims, because obviously there's a third one in the episode, are whistleblowers, and that's what this has all been about. It's not a serial killer. It was a trained killer making it look, because like she said, it was it was not like a frenzy. If this was like a serial killer, there'd be some frenzy to it, but it's like, no, there's not that much of a frenzy. So it was too calm and collected, but it turned out to be, like I said, a hired gun by someone behind all of this. In that instance, in the house and everything, him like choking her, like she's trying to defend herself, like she, like I thought it was interesting how they handled that too. Like obviously cutting back to like the Buffalo Bill situation, obviously it being kind of a similar circumstance. He's trying to kill me, I'm trying to kill him before he gets the chance, type of situation. It was a literal thing of like, oh, he has a gun and I have one, and we kind of fired off at the same time. Like I said, very similar, the parallels to the Buffalo Bill situation, which obviously it ended up being Chris Holden Reed. I forgot I saw his name at the beginning. God, it's popped up in many different things. Thing I'm kind of best known for is probably Lost Girl. That might be like the thing I kind of know him for. I feel like there's something more recent. The Umbrella Academy. He was in season 2 of The Umbrella Academy. I knew it was something more recent I had seen him in. Regardless, tangents and all that, I do apologize. But he's willing to talk, but only if he gets a deal. So now it creates this whole situation, especially because Paul, for him, it's like, what are you doing? Do you have any evidence of that? It's like, well, whatever. You're going to label this as a serial killer. And she's like, no, like, why won't you listen to even a possibility? He's like, I am. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not letting some junior FBI agent put my people, my team in danger just based on your, gut feelings and stuff like that. Because for him, it's like, here you are talking like coming at me with these preconceived notions of like, you think you know who I am, which is also kind of effed up because for him, he feels like she's unstable. Obviously the psychiatrist being like, yeah, she might flip out at any point in time. Everything with the Ruth situation, I think it's all just like Clarice is kind of suffering the ramifications of all these other contributing factors. It's she herself and probably a little resentment on his part, but he does seem like he is legitimately trying to look after her because he's like, I want you to stay at the desk. He's like, I'm doing this for your sake because, almost kind of implying like you could become your own worst enemy under these circumstances. So it does seem like he is trying. He's just coming off like an asshole. That's kind of what that is. But it's like Clarice is new to this. It's like she was kind of forced on him. The rest of his team, this is my team. We're solid. We're good. We got each other's back. Everybody plays their role. But then it's like when it comes to her, Esquivel is like the only person who seems like he's willing to kind of give her a shot and give her a chance and kind of, because for him, he's like, he believes her because it's like you kind of do your thing, and the fact is that you can see things a certain way people can't. Like you are important because you are able to see things only the way you can, So he's the only one on the team, at least so far, that it seems like he's really giving her a shot. At least they're definitely the only ones that have really kind of spent some time together. So I guess I'm curious to see if this particular case is going to be the overarching case. Or, I'm curious how that's going to operate. Like, obviously, I'm assuming they're going to have other cases to work on, too. I'm curious to see what the structure of the show is going to be like. Like I said, I get the feeling that this is like, I'm maybe a little bit, like, obviously it's the comparison you can't help but make a little bit, but maybe a little Hannibal. That was like crime of the week type of situation, but obviously having the overarching story. I mean, granted, we knew what that overarching story was about Hannibal, but I'm curious, like, well, there were also, it's been a while since I've seen Hannibal. There were like overarching stories about a particular serial killer too, not just Hannibal. There were multiple serial killers, but I'm curious like if they're going to handle it like that, because obviously there was like a more political angle to this. Like that was even something they were talking about like in the like synopsis of this show, that she navigates the political world because she's used as a political piece. And I think that is something interesting to think about. Like you were just doing your job and you solving this particular case not only makes you kind of like the forefront of the FBI, but also you're a chess piece to be moved on a board, Like I said, Ruth, you kind of understand, like, she has good intentions, granted. Just don't feel like she's kind of going about things, like, the best way that she could. But, Ruth. But at the very end, Clarice is being asked, about the serial killer and everything. And for her, she makes the point to say, like, you guys want to get caught up on the wrong details because of this. Like, you want to sexualize this. I mean, like, oh, the next Buffalo Bill, kind of, not necessarily. But it's like, you want to focus on that. It's like, let's focus on the victims. Their stories is what's more important here. And she's saying that he wasn't a serial killer. He was a hired gun. That this story isn't over. And until it's over, she's going to stick. I'm not going anywhere. And you also see her friend, Adelia, and I didn't bring this up, her probably being one of the few connections she has from her FBI, her before graduating and becoming like a full-fledged FBI agent. Like that's probably like one of her only few connections to that left, because I think she was smiling and happy to see like Clarice kind of like, because she understands what Clarice is going through and what everyone's kind of using her, like she gets it. And I think for Clarice kind of like to kind of stand up for herself in that moment, to be like, hey, this is what's going down, like. I'm not going to bow down. Like I think in her own way, she's speaking for the victims, because like their stories were kind of cut short. We're not, because so much of this is about the killers. We're not focusing on the people that are most important, the people that, have people that ended up getting left behind, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all that goes. She even had that book of like people she wants to see basically burn in hell, which I'm like, I don't know if that's something kind of in reference. I don't know if that's going to be something like maybe like later movies ended up referencing, because that didn't pop up in the movie. So I'm wondering what that's about. I don't know. I wonder, did the books ever touch on her like having? I mean, this might be something specific, like original, like it's. Because what I'm wondering is, like, is any of this canon? Like, did the books ever cover any, like, maybe even the future movies, did they ever cover, well, at least, because I know she's connected at least to the second movie. Obviously, the third movie is a different character dealing with Lecter. I'm curious, in the grand scheme of things, like, was there anything touched on in the book or future stuff about some of the stuff she did in between? Because there was a 10-year period in between The Silence of the Lamb and the Hannibal movie, but I'm like, I don't know if once again, I didn't see it yet, so I don't, maybe I will watch it. I don't know. Like, obviously it's more important that I got the story of The Silence of the Lambs. I might not necessarily, because part of me wonders, like, do I need the next movie just to have the context of, like, maybe some of the storylines they set up in this will lead to that whole, so I don't know. I'm probably thinking too much about it, but I'm curious to see, what direction the show, ends up going. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.